This video is part 2 of my fighting game Autobiography. For the first 20 years of the story, please go back and watch part 1.
Select and make your first pick. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Choose and pick the best one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Select and make your...
Let's set the stage. It's Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's 2002. I'm done with school. I'm working 2 jobs. I'm literally sleeping in the sunroom of a house with a bunch of college students. I'm single. I'm too busy to meet anyone, and I'm miserable. No offense, old roommates. It's not your fault, but y'all didn't catch Jesse at the best time in his life. Then I meet a Japanese woman. She's doing a year-long teaching gig at a school in St. Paul. And it sounds like the first half of her stay in the United States has been pretty crappy. I won't get into the details. Let's just say I was looking for someone, she was looking for someone, and we started dating. This happened in July of 2002. The bad news was that year-long teaching gig started in October 2001, which meant that in just 3 months she had to go back to Japan. During one of our sadder conversations near the end of those 3 months, I said, you know what, maybe I could move to Japan. I wasn't really sure if I could move to Japan, and neither was she. October came along, and I had to watch her get on a plane. It was rough for both of us. But that winter, we stayed in contact through a very early 2000s blend of email, paper letters, AOL Instant Messenger, and expensive long-distance phone calls. The opportunity I was looking for came along in April of 2003. I answered an ad for an English teaching or eikaiwa job in Japan, taking a big gamble and flying to Toronto for an interview I had no idea how to pass. But everything went fine, and I was invited to relocate to Japan for the job starting that June. A big move on a limited budget means getting rid of a lot of unnecessary items. And for me, in 2003, one of those was my PlayStation 2. I reluctantly sold it, telling myself that my Game Boy Advance SP would be enough to satisfy my gaming needs from then on. At the time, I even thought that I might be entering a new post-gaming phase in my life. And actually, for a while, it was fine. 2003 was a good time to own a Game Boy Advance, and there was a toy store in my new neighborhood in Japan sitting on what looked like a mountain of used games. In particular, I have fond memories of the Street Fighter Alpha 3 port for GBA. That plucky little handheld even had a KOF game called King of Fighters EX2 Howling Blood, which wasn't half bad. But no more PlayStation 2 meant no more Guilty Gear, unless I played the GBA version. No, that's not really doing it for me. Hello, what's this? It turned out that Japan had a healthy arcade scene, and one that favored fighting games heavily. Soon I had a handful of regular destinations, often places I could easily visit before or after work. My job had me traveling around East Tokyo, Chiba, and Saitama, and I was able to sniff out game centers with Guilty Gear machines in every neighborhood I visited. I made Guilty Gear a regular part of my before and after work ritual, even finding players in a couple of locations that would become my rivals. During these first 8 months of my new life in Japan, the woman I had met in Minneapolis was back in her hometown up north in far-off Iwate Prefecture. She came down to visit me once, and I went up to visit her once, but these 8 months, plus the intervening months between her return to Japan and my move, added up to more than a year of long-distance relationship, and it was starting to wear on us both. So, in February of 2004, she moved to Tokyo and we got an apartment together. Spoiler alert, we've now been married more than 10 years. Yeah, I know. It's a good story. Our new apartment had more space than the one I had been living in, prompting me to feel like it was okay to do a little bit of nesting, which meant buying another PlayStation 2. Console gaming still hadn't really reached the era of widely accessible online play yet at this point, so the fighting games I was playing, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Guilty Gear X2, and the Rumblefish among them, were largely single-player affairs. It was enough to satisfy my thirst for the artistic side of the genre, but didn't do much to make me grow as a player. At the end of 2004, the PSP came out, which I initially thought would be a perfect way to enjoy fighting games, until it just wasn't. A handful of fighting titles showed up, but I had expected more. I couldn't believe it. Bringing back a bunch of sprite-based fighters for this little handheld seemed like a no-brainer. Sony's first handheld turned out to be primarily a way to play Monster Hunter on the train, and not so much a way to enjoy my old 2D favorites. The best fighting title to grace the PSP was probably 2005's Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, but you know how I feel about Tekken, or at least you should if you watched part 1. The mid-aughts were the calm before the storm. Things had been quiet for a while, and they were about to get lively. In 2008, there seemed to be a revival, with multiple big fighting titles appearing. Arc System Works, the makers of Guilty Gear, introduced a new IP in the form of BlazBlue Calamity Trigger. And yeah, it is pronounced BlazBlue. I guess they borrowed the silent Z from the French language. It took a little while, but the formula, which seemed to be Guilty Gear minus some zaniness, minus the heavy metal but still rockin', started to grow on me eventually. On the 3D front, Namco released Soul Calibur 4. Yeah, the one with the Star Wars characters in it. And the one that did the best job of making Ivy into a hot grandma. There was also a 3D Samurai Spirits game that spring, but let's be real, I didn't even touch that one because it looked really bleh. But there was one more big one, a fighting game that would later be credited with reviving the popularity of a long dormant franchise. It was the first new numbered Street Fighter sequel in over a decade, Street Fighter 4. Excellent presentation aside, however, I'd be lying if I said I loved Street Fighter 4 right away. I was glad to see it was essentially still a 2D fighting game from a gameplay perspective, with the fighters never stepping out of their 2D plane. But the 3D character models weren't my favorite. Not my least favorite either, to be sure. King of Fighters 14 and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite would definitely outdo Street Fighter 4 in that regard soon enough. I bought Street Fighter 4 for the Xbox 360 and tried my hand against online opponents, but found only defeat. The game had this new focus attack mechanic that some players could use on a seemingly virtuosic level, but I couldn't get the Xbox 360 gamepad to do what I wanted. It took me months to figure out that the focus attack dash cancel, 4's somewhat inelegant replacement for 3's parry system, was much easier to pull off on an arcade stick than on a pad. From then on, I was playing on a stick for the foreseeable future. Oh, hey, Mortal Kombat 9, what's up? Yeah, whatever. Oh, hey, King of Fighters 13. Yeah, I'm kind of busy right now. Actually, those sprites are looking dope, though. Damn. Yeah, we'll talk later. Oh, hey, Marvel vs. Cap... You know what? Never mind. While I was puttering along as a mediocre Blanca player on Xbox Live, a documentary called I Am Street Fighter came out to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the series. Prior to that, I had been vaguely aware of the existence of professional competition in fighting games, but I hadn't been aware of how big it was getting. I Am Street Fighter drew my attention to what's considered now by many to be the peak of FGC hype, a match from EVO 2004. Maybe you've seen it. That famous clip of Umehara Daigo parrying all 15 hits of Justin Wong's Chun-Li Super and then punishing it with just enough damage to squeeze out a surprise win is responsible for as many people being converted into fighting fans as Marvin Gaye is responsible for babies being conceived. For me, it did two things. First, it drew my attention back to Third Strike, 13 years after the fact, and made me realize why everyone liked that game so much. And second, it got me interested for the first time in my life in esports. Then, in 2013, I became a proud father. I've been really trying. Not because of Marvin Gaye. Don't worry about it, we'll talk about that later. My interest in professional Street Fighter would draw my attention to the YouTube channel Cross Counter, where Ryan Gutierrez and Mike Ross were making a show in which they played Street Fighter online and got real worked up.
Yo, I learned a few things, man.
Okay.
I learned a few things by osmosis, Mike Ross.
Okay.
The excellent adventures of Gutex and Mike Ross would become my new favorite thing.
All right, we're here.
Oh, stop running at me! Stop running at me! Stop running at me!
I learned so much about Street Fighter from it, but maybe more importantly, I started to feel like I wanted to make my own similar YouTube show. I wanted people to share in my highs and lows as I faced off against the dark online underworld. I wanted people to see the lessons I learned unfold like a story. At first, I had some technical barriers to overcome, but after dumping my ancient Xbox 360 and replacing it with a newer one that had an HDMI out, I bought a capture card, and then I started my own online fighting drama called Fight Me.
I don't think so. Come on. I'll be taking those points. This guy doesn't know how to deal with cross-up rolling. I'm about to beat him. I'm about to beat number 30 Cody. Yeah!
The irony is that the simple desire to get good hadn't been enough to motivate me to practice. The desire to make more episodes of Fight Me, however, would push me not only to refine my Blanca, but eventually to start looking at other characters. My Street Fighter 4 Blanca peaked at around 410th place among Blancas on Xbox Live, and I had started to pick up DeCapri and Dalsim. I even tried to challenge myself, or maybe torture myself with special self-imposed rules. A handful of episodes featured what I called the lockup game, in which a loss with a character meant that I could no longer play that character until a win with another character had broken him or her out of jail. It was fun and frustrating, and it made for good YouTube. You should watch it.
He messed up the punish, and I still lost. And Blanca is in jail. And my two best characters are in jail.
One night in June of 2015, I bumped into the number one Blanca player in Japan, Nishikido Hiroshi, also called Nishiking, in Shinjuku. He couldn't believe I had recognized him, and we talked for a few minutes on the street. He told me to look for him at the Taito Station Game Center near the JR Shinjuku Southeast exit if I ever wanted a friendly game. Until then, I hadn't realized that arcade was the hangout of choice for a lot of pro players in the Tokyo area. This marked the start of a new habit, stopping by Taito Station every time I was in Shinjuku just to see who was around. During these late months of the Street Fighter 4 era, I was lucky enough to play a couple of spectacularly one-sided matches against pro players like Nemo and Koji KOG. Don't worry, I got blown up every time, but I still like to tell people that we played together. It's a badge of honor that a lot of better players than I don't get to wear. Street Fighter V came out without Blanca. So I looked at it as an opportunity to learn someone else, even though I correctly predicted that Blanca would eventually enter the roster. This time, my need for speed made me gravitate toward Cammy. I pined for the focused attack mechanic from Street Fighter 4, but I was determined to make the best of it. When Blanca did make his way into the game in early 2018, it took a while for me to figure him out. Some of the old mix-ups like cross-up jumping medium kicks still worked. Others, like 50-50 rolling on an opponent as they wake up, had been nerfed or replaced with new dirty tricks. But this was the delicate balance every Street Fighter sequel had to strike, the right mix of familiarity and novelty to keep a maximum number of players happy. Now in my 40s, I have no illusions about ever being great at a game that requires such quick reflexes, let alone entering another tournament ever again. But that doesn't bother me because I believe the children are the future. My daughter is 7 now, and she knows enough about Street Fighter to know that she really likes Dalsim and Chun-Li. She recently told me that one night she had a dream she was in a Street Fighter tournament. That's my girl. When she plays, she mashes with both hands and she gets very competitive. But she has a lot of fun, she likes the characters, and she loves to win. And in the end, that's probably the essence of it. Fighting games can be appreciated for their beauty, their attitude, their depth, and their subtlety. A match is simultaneously a competition as well as a conversation. And through their actions in the game, players can come to know each other's minds in ways that words might never reveal. The mindset that allows players to learn from a loss and use the experience to prevent the same kind of loss in the future is as useful in everyday life as it is in games. And the feeling of accomplishment at having overcome an opponent who uses strategies that seemed cheap or unfair at first is one of the greatest feelings in the world. I'm Jesse Jace. Please like this video, subscribe to Chorus Isolate Confirm, and thank you for watching.